Here was the big thing that happened over the weekend. I don't know if you guys know, there's this thing called March Madness, and it's kind of a big deal. And Michigan State, they were one of the Sweet 16 teams. They had an opportunity once again, second year in a row, to get themselves to either the Elite Eight, to the Final Four. They were certainly among some of the teams that were, poised as one of those teams where people, I'm sure some people had them in the Final Four. But they lost to UConn. And they lost this game, I think, in a particularly frustrating way, but yet an expected way. I had been talking about this for a good amount of the season about Michigan State, which is that they do not have a real scoring threat. They have a lot of guys who can get hot. They have a lot of guys who are skilled and can even, get on a roll, but they don't have that guy that when you need him most, you get him the ball and he's going to score, whether it's a jumper, whether it's, a lob pass to, for an assist, whatever the case might be. They didn't have that guy. And Jeremy Fierce is great, but he's not a scorer primarily. Not in my mind, not in my mind. And I think in most people's minds, he can't shoot from three. He doesn't have the best jump shot, but he's a really good passer and a good facilitator. But, in order to be an effective facilitator, you need to have guys that facilitate. You need to have guys that finish the facilitation, right? You need to have a guy who could shoot the ball accurately, consistently. And as fun as Kurt Hang could be, he was not that. Or Jackson Kohler, or even Cohen Carr at times. And look, as far as the actual game with UConn was, this was the epitome, I think, of Michigan State this whole season, which was they went down big early because they couldn't score. UConn was just having their way, forcing Michigan State's offense to beat them, which was very easy. And then they spent much of the game climbing and clawing back only to fall short. Because here was the major difference. And I know this is going to sound so simplistic and so, hot buttony. When Michigan State needed to score, when Michigan State needed to go on a run, they didn't. When UConn needed to score, when UConn needed to go on a run, they did. End of story. That was the end of Michigan State season, literally and figuratively. They could not generate an offensive run at the moments when you need to generate the offensive run, because they could get a little bit of that. They could get ahead, by 2 or by 1, but they would immediately give it up because then their defense would start to collapse because the guys are exhausted just clawing their way back. Now, I know this is a topic primarily about Michigan State hoops, and so I don't want to, focus on other programs, but I think this is important. Michigan is in the Final Four this year. Hats off to Dusty May and Lendenborg and all the guys over at UofM for getting themselves to the Final Four. You know what's interesting about that? Last year, Michigan State made it farther than Michigan in the tournament. They went to the Elite Eight. Michigan only made it to the Sweet 16. Michigan State also won the Big Ten outright. They lost the Big Ten tournament. That was Michigan's win. Basically, since last year, outside of that Elite Eight run, Michigan has out-basketballed Michigan State. Put it frankly, okay? This past year, they beat you twice. There's that. Despite you playing them pretty tough in both of those games. It gets out of hand late in the game, but overall, I don't think anybody would say it's wrong to say that Michigan State played Michigan fairly tough and made them a little antsy at different points in those games. Michigan also, of course, won the Big Ten outright. They didn't win the Big Ten tournament. That went to Purdue. And now, on top of putting up their banner for their Big Ten championship, they are now going to put up their banner for their Final Four run. And to be perfectly frank, they very well could put up a banner for a national championship. They are that good. They will have to beat Arizona, obviously, which is, frankly, that game is going to be the national championship because Illinois, I do not trust, and UConn, as crazy as Dan Hurley is, and I love me a crazy college basketball coach, I don't see him beating Michigan or Arizona. I can see him beating Illinois, but that's a discussion for another day. Now, how did Michigan do this? This is the question. I think the answer is very simple. They went and they got the best player available in the transfer portal and paid him a bunch of money. They paid Yaxel Lendenborg a boatload of money. They gave him an offer that he couldn't refuse. And he is the engine of that team. Now, you have other guys like Amara, like a Cadeau, like all these other players on Michigan that, obviously have their role and obviously are great players. But Lendenborg is the engine. Now, Michigan's best player is Lendenborg, a guy who is probably going to go in the first round in the NBA draft, if not this year, certainly next year. The best player Michigan State has is Jeremy Fears. That is no disrespect to one of the great point guards in Michigan State history, Jeremy Fears. He really is. I mean, like this, people might laugh at it, but it's true. I mean, the guy has one of the best assist numbers in the school history. He's had some great moments in the tournament. But you cannot sit here and tell me that Lendenborg and Fears are even in the same stratosphere. Lendenborg's an NBA type player. Fears is just a good college player. And that is the difference. You don't have those NBA players. And frankly, Michigan State really hasn't had that many NBA players since maybe Xavier Tillman. Maybe. I mean, you want to go back, maybe Miles Bridges, obviously. He's an NBA player. Jaren Jackson. We're talking 10 years ago. We're talking over a decade at this point. Michigan, on the other hand, has had plenty of NBA players come through. Now, granted, they haven't won the national championship, but neither has Michigan State. So, look, the reality is that you're going to need to use the transfer portal because as good as Michigan State's recruiting, especially this upcoming recruiting class, it has been, you see with Michigan, they went from exit in the Sweet 16, losing to Michigan State twice, to completely flipping their program to a national championship level contender. Just like that. It didn't take that long. Dusty May didn't have to just do a whole lot. Heck, even in his first year, taking over a garbage Michigan program, he immediately turned it around, immediately made them a Big Ten tournament championship. All you got to do, if you're Tom Izzo, is do like half as much of the NIL transfer portal stuff that Michigan was doing. If you bring in, a guy, I'm not saying that you got to go out and get the best player available, like a Yaxel Lendenborg, whoever that is in this particular offseason, in this particular class. I'm not saying you got to go and do that. But if you could do a little bit of that, if you could do 65% of that, if you could find the second, third, or fourth best transfer portal player who is going to complement whoever the best, Michigan State doesn't have a center coming into next year, probably. They're either going to have I was going to say a rookie. At this point, college sports is basically pro sports. So they're either going to have a freshman or maybe somebody that's in-house that nobody's ever heard of, but they're more likely probably going to have to bring in a transfer. Why don't you go out and get one of the best transfers available? I don't know who that is, just to be clear. So I'm not, going to crucify Tom on getting or not getting somebody. Maybe there's nobody really there. But if you can go out and find the best center available, give him an offer you can't refuse. You're telling me that a college basketball player in the year of our Lord, 2026 and 2027, doesn't want to play for one of the most iconic college basketball programs ever and for one of the best coaches ever? And if you can't sell that to them, if you can't sell them on that program itself, and as well as the actual money, the actual financial incentive, well, then you're failing at your job as building a team. And I love Tom Izzo. I am probably I'm not here to be a homer or anything like that, But I have told Michigan State fans to be careful what they wish for when they say things like he needs to go. Because he is one of the all-time great coaches, not just college coaches, just coaches in any sport. So be careful what you wish for. But Tom, buddy, if you want to win a national championship again, which I know he does, you have to go out and be serious in the transfer portal. I know you don't like it. I don't like it. I know you don't like NIL. I don't like it. Michigan is showing you it works. It's how you can win. Now, you can also win by recruiting. You can also win by developing. But once again, if you just forfeit one avenue of building your team, you're just not going to elevate. Michigan's recruiting decently well. Michigan's developing decently well. But they are also incredible at maneuvering the transfer portal. And sometimes getting a ready-made player, a guy who just is ready to go. You don't need to do the hard work of developing the jumper or developing the defense or developing whatever. Sometimes it's just the right move to go out and say, you know what, this guy's ready to go. You insert him into our lineup, and we're immediately a much better team. Sometimes that's just how it goes. And I hope that Tom will just pull the trigger and make those moves. Hey, YouTube, if you like clips like that, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. We've got live shows every Tuesday night. Hope to see you there.